This is Edward Harshman giving an explanation for the liberal bias in the media. It comprises several theories that seem to work together. This is not an academic study that is based on major formal research. It is one person's opinion with facts and analysis to support it. A popular doctrine is that media bias derives from a consciously created conspiracy. Here, I offer evidence that the many contributors to a liberal bias can work together to create the effect of a conspiracy despite its not existing at all. Part 1. Rational reasons for media bias. It maximizes profit. An irrational audience, or client base, of the media is fairly easy to infer. Media bias, to the extent that it is caused by an irrational audience, has four main components. First, media constitute a unique industry, partially though not entirely because intellectual property itself has long-term trivial value if it is made available to the public. Second, the component of the audience that is emotion-driven and seeks affirmation or bonding seeks confirmation of friendly emotional content. It is repelled by dissimilar attitudes and insists on consensus, not challenge. Third, neurotransmitter addiction worsens the effect of the emotion-seeking behavior of the irrational audience. Fourth, the audience thinks superficially and seems incapable of detailed reasoning. The fifth rational reason for media bias relates not to characteristics of the audience, but is for the benefit of advertisers. The sixth rational reason is one of survival. Details follow. Intellectual property. Begin by noting that media create and distribute intellectual property, and that intellectual property itself is not only intangible but also perishable. For this analysis, divide the media into two parts, not perfectly because of some overlap, but as a workable approximation: the news media and the entertainment media. Formerly, news media were well paid for seeking and disseminating facts. Modern electronic communication, principally the Internet, has made the circulation of facts essentially free, erasing that component of media's income. Printed newspapers are disappearing. Intellectual property can have great value if it is kept secret and is part of a manufacturing process or important to the military. But intellectual property that is intended to satisfy the public directly is neither, and can be substituted easily by competitors if its price is too high. Providing facts or impartial material brings very little revenue to the media. Low-cost, often free competition requires media to offer something else to acquire significant profit. Here is evidence that the value of intellectual property trends toward but never reaches zero. Patents and copyrights expire, higher education is available for free on the Internet and does not require personal visits to classrooms to receive, and the Internet gives free access to much that had been very expensive to purchase. For example, computer software, including the operating system Linux, and website development software such as SeaMonkey, FileZilla, and NetBeans are free. OpenOffice.org offers free word processing software. Many public domain books, songs, and movies can be legally downloaded free after a brief search for them on the Internet. Media must offer something other than factual information to survive profitably in such an environment. Emotional content sells for a good price, dispassionate facts don't. Facts are nowadays available essentially for free on the Internet. Emotional content. First, the news media. News media clients who know what facts or commentary they seek and who are uninterested in other material available to them are not very good revenue sources to the media. Those clients can obtain what they want at little expense, thereby contributing little revenue. Therefore, the news media must cater to those people in their client base who do not know what they seek specifically and are each satisfied by an emotional stimulus. Popular conservative commentators exist and can be well paid. So do conservative media. But they rely on circulating underpublicized facts, eliciting surprise and vivid acceptance from conservatives. The emotional reaction that they induce does exist, but it is that of being disabused from the misleading beliefs earlier implanted by the conventional media. Meanwhile, liberal commentators merely repeat what is already known with or without adding new facts themselves. Research takes work. Reciting popular opinions after becoming a celebrity does not. News media viewership increases with fear and with emotionally charged content. Usually, people pay for goods and services that make them feel better instead of emotionally charged. The amusement and entertainment industry with roller coasters and horror films and the gambling industry are obvious exceptions and contrive to make their clients emotionally charged. Declarations of climate-induced doom elicit fear. Reassurances by scientists that all is well do not. The preference of news media to induce an emotional response requires them to avoid offering any defensible solutions to the problems that they discuss. If a problem is arguably solved, then the audience gratefully learns the solution and then ceases to be a media revenue source, ending the income stream that it had previously supplied. Media are paid to perpetuate the illusion, accurately or not, that important problems exist. Reality is secondary. For most of the modern media audience, if there is no emotional content during a presentation, then boredom results. Modern short attention spans refute the hypothesis that an audience will follow a non-trivial chain of step-by-step reasoning to a rational conclusion. To a media executive, boredom is bad because it alienates the customer base. That base, meanwhile, if it gets bored, will feel not only uninterested but also hostile. Having made the effort to watch the video or TV show or read the article, it will acquire a feeling of betrayal. This form of betrayal, the broken implicit promise of an emotionally significant event, occurs frequently, even though it is sometimes not openly admitted, when a woman goes on a date and the man with her is not demonstrative. It is less clearly present, and again not openly admitted, when media are assessed by an emotion-seeking audience. Evidence of the emotional needs superseding rational decisions. Women on dates prefer men with emotional content, who push them off balance, to men who are textbook polite and emotionally silent. The same preference afflicts some women and some men too when they assess media content. Masculine men, conversely, will first identify what they want from the news media, then look for it, perhaps seeking specific facts or inquiring about news of a favorite sports team or a political figure. Having found what they seek, they stop looking for it. Second, the entertainment media. Entertainment media, meanwhile, offer a virtual reality that satisfies an emotional need. Visual and audio recording, storage, transmission, and reproduction have improved greatly during the past century. There has been a gradual and stepwise but huge transition from static-strewn radio broadcasts and black and white silent movies in theaters to in-home giant color high-resolution video screens with high-fidelity surround sound. Until the mid-1960s, when color television became common, there was a clear sensory demarcation between what was seen and heard for entertainment and what was seen and heard because it was literal reality. That distinction in what is perceived has since been substantially erased in the careless. Personal responsibility and maximum self-reliance are cornerstones of conservative thought. The responsible and self-reliant will often turn toward the media because watching a show is enjoyable, but the show's role as a form of entertainment, an adjunct to life, is always remembered. The careless or lazy, if they feel dissatisfied generally, will often turn toward media to seek comfort or validation, to enter a virtual world in which they can identify with characters or a theme. By evading personal responsibility to manage their own drives and feelings, they become dependent on media that offer such a virtual world. The self-reliant don't value such a virtual world and are not good media clients by that standard. The careless or lazy, meanwhile, are. Media scriptwriters, guided by this principle, carefully deliver plot lines that validate liberal doctrines to foster addiction to their shows. Conservative plot lines, containing themes of self-reliance, would repel a liberal audience. They may attract a conservative one, true, but addiction to them would not occur. If you doubt the component of addiction in the entertainment media, note the distress, the withdrawal symptoms that occur from time to time when a well-recognized show stops recording new episodes due to the end of a season, or, worse, permanently. Creation and maintenance of neurotransmitter addiction. The news and entertainment media benefit when they provide emotional content to satisfy their audience's demands explicitly. Additionally, they benefit further when, deliberately or otherwise, they exploit neurotransmitters and their addictive qualities in their audiences. When people have a sense of fear, norepinephrine and perhaps other neurotransmitters are released in their brains. When the cause of the fear is overpowered or there is a rescue, or when the media show such an outcome of reassurance, the neurotransmitters of fear are no longer significantly present. The brain adapts to the changes of neurotransmitter availability, including their fluctuations. A neurological expectation of their intermittent abundance may occur, and that expectation induces neurophysiological changes, therefore addiction. Changes in the brain due to gambling addiction are verified. Changes induced by media-induced emotional shifts are probable, but are unlikely to be announced by the media themselves. Therefore, a rational reason for liberal bias in the news media and entertainment media includes a wish to get its audience addicted to the neurotransmitter rush from fear and other emotions. Addiction to fear is easily explained by noting the release of fear-related neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, from relevant news media and the urge of media clients to seek them. With the entertainment media, addiction to vicarious affection, oxytocin, and vicarious stability, serotonin, may also occur. Evidence of addiction to neurotransmitters includes the receding standards that identify art specimens as shocking, and the encroaching standards that identify sexual behavior as forbidden. Here's how. Decades ago, various characteristics such as nudity were forbidden in art and, if present anyway, induced horror. In a gradual shift, what was at first dreadful became mildly unpleasant and later fully accepted. Meanwhile, the formerly unimaginable became imaginable and acquired the same shock value as the formerly horrifying things had. The continuity of the standard of shocking to mildly unpleasant to accepted remained constant, but what it applied to has varied over time. As what did induce an emotion of being shocked became accepted, those who sought an emotional shock had to demand more and more drastic stimuli. The art world, including some rap music lyrics, has cooperated with this demand. That process closely resembles tolerance in the context of addictive drugs. A bigger and bigger dose is needed to achieve the same effect. Conversely, standards of male-on-female sexual behavior has changed. in the reverse direction. True harassment, the actions of disrespectful men who interact with women expecting to upset them, or worse, is bad and is outside this analysis. But men's behavior that is intended to overstep strict politeness and bring about a reaction by women of playful uneasiness, of flirtatious teasing with temporary discomfiture, always respectful, always permitting a graceful rejection by an uninterested woman, has been banned recently on college campuses and in work settings. As men relearn the stricter and stricter rules, women discover that the men around them are sexually silent. Liberal women, unwilling to identify the difference between true harassment and fair expressions of men's interest, obtain the emotional interplay that they seek not by cooperating with honorable men, but by reinterpreting what was ordinary, non-controversial behavior as something inappropriate, thereby getting the emotional experience that they seek. Liberal women refuse to identify specifically what behavior men should adopt that will leave them free from the risk of being accused of harassment. They prefer not to solve the alleged harassment problem, instead preferring discretionary standards leaving them with the right to complain arbitrarily. The unconditional need to complain, which is not the same as the capacity to complain about predetermined known wrongs and thereby defend against true harassment, must have a cause. The progressive and often primarily implicit restriction of men's behavior, which creates settings in which men's actions, even in good faith, can be officially challenged and therefore in which complaints are probable, strongly suggests that the need to complain is itself important. That need, therefore, probably derives from a neurotransmitter fix. Actively seeking unhappiness is irrational. There must be a reason for it that does not rely on rational thought. Neurophysiological damage is a probable explanation. The receding point at which a reward occurs, the change by any absolute standard of what constitutes a desired emotional provocation, is very consistent with tolerance in the sense of more and more of an addictive substances being required to achieve the desired effect. Case for a neurotransmitter addiction instead of a purely irrational preference. This reasoning corroborates belief in a rational preference for news and entertainment media to disseminate emotionally charged content and not fact-centered problem-solving content. Superficial audience. Irrational components of the media audience are not limited to direct seeking of emotional satisfaction, whether due to neurotransmitter addiction or to other causes. Defective educations disparage critical thinking, so that quick overviews and spoon-fed inferences suffice. The detailed, multi-step reasoning of conservative opinions is out of the audience's reach. Peer pressure, meanwhile, is not. Liberals are content to show concern by attending rallies, giving to poorly screened charities, and wearing ribbons to show solidarity instead of truly trying to solve the problems that worry them. Demonstrations of concern satisfy emotional needs directly and comply with peer pressure, achieving positive feedback and avoiding being badgered by abusive activists. These rituals of concern, of course, leave unchallenged the problems that they announce. Peer pressure has been verified as a distortion of human decision-making and will divert the undecided toward following the most popular options or those favored by social bullies. The weak-willed cannot defend their opinions and therefore surrender to consensus with no or trivial analysis. They are exploited by bullies who demand consensus and offer them the reward of bonding when they comply. But there is proof that the media audience is superficial enough to be unreachable by the ordinary logical reasoning that we conservatives love. Here's the proof. What constitutes the minimum standard to which the poor should be raised is never discussed in the media, and the technological improvements during the past century that allow us to achieve high living standards are totally ignored. Many people during the 1950s were happy, and offering the poor the capacity to purchase exactly whatever such people owned is never considered. Media executives know on some level that if the ongoing controversy about any particular concept could be guided constructively toward a consensus, with a path of action that receives general agreement and that will in fact be used, then the entire controversy ceases to be of value to the media. A strict attitude of disclosing facts and permitting fair debate about the problems that result from them, if used, would lead to clear solutions to social problems, erase much of the content of modern news media, and virtually shut down those parts of them that oversee politics and economics. Of course, media executives prefer to perpetuate social problems instead of solve them. But one would expect some liberal commentators to propose an endpoint, a standard of living, whether in healthcare or in housing or in education, measured by direct quality experienced by the beneficiaries, not by money spent on it or the process by which resources are created and distributed, that if reached would be considered enough. Such a proposal has never occurred. It would have been presented for debate, even if it were to be rejected as too generous or too miserly, if audiences were not too superficial to debate the issue. Media executives would try to suppress such a proposal, but a unanimous blackout, including on all social media, is almost certainly unrealistic. Media are affected by advertisers. Not all of media business decisions derive from catering directly to their audiences. Part of the reason for the emotional content is to attract advertising revenue. Advertisements are more likely to affect sales, thereby being successful, if those who encounter them have a mindset of emotion than one of critical thinking. Weakening the wills of their clients, so that advertisements are not only seen and heard, but also bring about purchases by the consumers, is a clear monetary motive of media. Conversely, advertisers dislike having the consumers who encounter their ads do so after a mental exercise in critical thought. Skeptical consumers are less likely to buy things, especially on impulse, than consumers who are already emotionally stimulated or otherwise mentally off balance. Interlocking ownership and its corollary, productive passivity, also create a conflict of interest between media and their audience. These two concepts are dangerous to a free economy in the very long run. More on them later. Part 2. Rational decisions by media executives that are not intended to maximize profit of their employers. Not all liberal media bias results from direct attempts to maximize profit. Rational media executives can make decisions such that their interests differ from the media themselves. Details follow. Fear of violence. Rational. Media seek to avoid dangerous retaliation in the form of boycotts and vandalism and murder that can result from antagonizing liberal mobs. The danger is real. Experience from college campuses when conservative people try to give presentations is irrefutable. Executives who may fear for their own safety may choose to cooperate with liberal gangsters, even when an impartial analysis would show that defying them and risking retaliation would be the better business decision for their employers. Agency bias. Serve the stockholders, not the pure profit motive. Most USA corporations nowadays are owned, or the decisions to buy or sell their stock is controlled, not by individual stockholders, but by fund managers. Union welfare funds, pension funds, mutual funds, and brokerage accounts that are overseen by personally hired fund managers represent a large majority of the holders of stock of media corporations. Individual investors, with rare exceptions, don't make significant buy and sell decisions for themselves. For these reasons, executives try to keep the value of their employer's stock up by trying to please the purchasing agents, even when the agent's criteria for appraising a corporation are not the same as those that an impartial investor would use. The same irrational pressures, discussed later, that afflict media executives also afflict fund managers. Media executives, due to a duty to their stockholders, must pay attention to what fund managers demand, even if those demands differ from an otherwise ideal corporate profit-maximizing strategy. Evidence of agency bias can be inferred from the corporate mergers of companies with dissimilar businesses. These mergers reduce the aggregate risk of investing in the big corporation, as the only unhedged risk is that all of its businesses might simultaneously decline. But if corporations each confine themselves to one business, then investors could appraise the businesses one at a time and get the same risk-avoidant result without, if they choose not to, investing partially in a business that is a bad investment in itself. Non-beta risk, beta in the financial not male-female sense, can be reduced to nearly zero as stockholders diversify their holdings on their own, investing a small fraction of their assets into their own choice of each of several dissimilar corporations. Individual stockholders would complain effectively to corporate management about this issue. A badly run subsidiary of a generally well-run corporation, tolerated perhaps due to its management's family connections with the board of directors, can exist unchallenged indefinitely. Mergers of dissimilar companies into big corporations can allow incompetent subsidiaries to persist because stockholders are held hostage by the mandated diversity imposed by corporate executives instead of being free to diversify as they choose. Meanwhile, investment managers approve the diversity of large corporations and content themselves with the ability to tell skeptical clients that the corporations in which they invest are themselves diversified, therefore of lower risk than each of the single business companies that they contain. Not declared is that when a subsidiary company has an extremely good profit, its success is diluted by the other subsidiaries of its parent corporation, so that the possibility of a huge profit is kept low, not just the possibility of a huge loss. Interlocking ownership. This concept is fairly difficult to understand and is closely linked to the doctrine of maximizing consumption, which is not the same as maximizing benefit to the consumer. The key concept here is that there is a difference between a corporation's trying to maximize its own profits and a corporation's trying to maximize the income of its stockholders. The difference does not exist when a stockholder owns stock in only one company, but that's almost never the case. Whoever owns shares in a media corporation almost certainly owns shares in other corporations too. An increase in income of the media corporation would upset its stockholders if those stockholders also own stock in other corporations, and those other corporations had a bigger per investor decrease in income. With the high probability that an entertainment media corporation's stockholders also own stock in many corporations that provide consumer goods, it will be careful not to portray self-reliance in its TV and movie scripts. If viewers can learn how to avoid purchasing clothing because they are reminded of sewing machines, or how to avoid buying new cars because they are reminded of techniques of car repairs and maintenance, or how to avoid buying new electronics because they are reminded of software and cable adapters that make the older devices work better, then those viewers would spend less money. Very likely, revenue will decrease to the other corporations co-owned by most of the media's stockholders. The outcome of interlocking ownership includes the principle that consumers should be encouraged to spend generally, not merely spend on a corporation's own product or service. Entertainment media, therefore, work productive passivity, the unwillingness and inability to take initiative toward specific ways to reduce household expense, into their scripts. The doctrine of productive passivity presented essentially unanimously to audiences throughout entertainment media, undermines the conservative mindset and places a liberal bias into the thought processes of the media audience. The capacity to think creatively about problems and solve them, in the household context, is erased. That loss of creative thought about real problems spreads to politics and to bigger social problems, inducing a liberal bias in the audience, which then prefers liberal-biased movies and TV shows. There is an obvious consequence of interlocking ownership. Nothing in a movie or TV show will undermine an advertised product or any product that may be advertised in the future. Productive passivity and its liberal and long-term disastrous ideology are thereby flaunted. Agency bias, self-serving. The agency bias of media executives personally is very similar to the bias that distorts their corporations to please investment managers. This bias, however, is intended not to keep demand high for corporate stock, but to protect the executives and their personal livelihoods in case something goes wrong with their decisions. An executive may be encouraged to adopt a liberal bias because even if consequent corporate policies result in a drop in profit and in stock price, they are defensible to those who own the stock or control its purchase and sale. Conversely, if an executive does something unusual and a drop in profits results, then that executive will be fired and will be hard-pressed to get another job. Cooperating with the liberal consensus is far less personally risky than is eschewing it. This bias afflicts all large companies, but it is most important in the media. Part 3. Irrational decisions by media executives. Now for the irrational reasons, proof that media executives and others in news and entertainment are at least partially irrational and not totally motivated by loyalty to their employers, personal gain, job security, or other understandable motives. Media attract and are attracted to liberals. Media attract, as a career, people interested in social problems but who don't have solutions for them. People who are interested in social problems and believe that they have solutions for them will instead, if motivated, become politically active and try to affect their solutions, perhaps by running for office and perhaps by holding demonstrations. The conservative people who are interested in social problems usually have proposed solutions in mind and won't bother with the media except to use them to help get their solutions put into effect. Liberals interested in social problems and who have no clear solutions to offer won't mind devoting themselves to the news media as a principal career. Entertainment media, meanwhile, attract brainwashers and the brainwashed to perpetuate addictions to their products and those manufactured by their co-owners, and in so doing contrive to distort the thought processes of those who work for them. Narcissists and people with shallow personalities who value attention from the masses and who can adapt their demeanors easily as demanded by a movie or TV show director, favor work in the entertainment media. These people can have their narcissistic demands more and more satisfied while acting, but meanwhile acquiring dependence on emoting on command along liberal scripts, thereby encountering neurotransmitter addictions. As skill portraying various demeanors increases, strength of commitment to one's own original mindset and principles decreases. Movie and TV stars who are successful professionally but whose personal lives are dysfunctional are common. Underlying dissociation of executives from the rank and file. The mindset of corporate managers is abstract, very dissociated from the work on the assembly lines or other directly productive work. White male privilege has been debunked by review of laws and thorough scrutiny of relative incomes of men and women, whites and non-whites, but the concept of a perceived privilege is legitimate if it is redefined as the inability to sympathize with people worse off than oneself in a specified context because of lack of experience in being in the plights of such people, or, worse, believing that such plights cannot exist despite being confronted with proof that they do. Using this definition, many or perhaps most top executives of major corporations are privileged, therefore greatly detached from the low-status culture and belief sets of the working class. Imputed beliefs exist because top executives do not have the visceral mindset of rank-and-file workers or consumers, and feel intellectually superior because they are monetarily superior. In factories, this difference has been studied and labor relations has become a managerial science. Not so for media. The old feedback loop, by which hecklers and angry letters to editors tended to keep warped leaders from cognitively and intellectually drifting away from the masses, no longer exists. A belief in stewardship, not just corporate management. Executives are dissociated with power and with a drive to use that power for the common good. With power and a hope to use it honorably comes stewardship, a motive not just to do what is right for their corporate employer, but also to do what is right for the world generally. The dissimilar backgrounds and the stewardship obligation combine to form an irrational reason for the liberal media bias, wrong beliefs imputed to the audience. With a belief that the media clients are too intellectually impaired to make political and economic decisions themselves, media executives can easily decide that any dissent is irrational or stupid. Bad business decisions result, of course. The reliance on imputed beliefs is widespread and is ignored by mental health professionals in the USA as of late 2019. Modern education includes teaching reading by the whole word method, which requires the small child to guess a new word from its general shape and the words around it that the child already knows. Not only do children learn to read this way, albeit not as well as by using phonics, but also they learn that what they expect to see is what they really do see. A guess is correct, or they have a right to be angry and feel betrayed by an improbable situation that misleads them. Look, listen, infer, guess, and you're right. Otherwise, it's the fault of whatever brought about the wrong guess, not your fault for using bad logic. Perceptions of what people of various races and genders think and feel, therefore, are acquired from the lazy and destructive habit of looking around and making a guess as to what those people think and feel, and contrary facts are suppressed. The media use powerful suppression of counterexamples to such guesses, such as black conservatives. Media executives, like their audiences, try to hide evidence that their thought processes are defective. Systematic wrong guesses derive partially from the beliefs in stewardship for the common good, which, together with consensus, distorts rational business decisions toward those that control the masses. The Imposter Syndrome. The Imposter Syndrome, which afflicts some people with high-ranking jobs, is a belief that one does not deserve the prestigious position that one has. Top executives with it have a compulsion to do something to justify being on top. If an executive does nothing, which may in fact be the best thing to do for a media corporation, that would be proof of being superfluous. No egotist and no one afflicted with the imposter syndrome will allow that proof to occur. Solace from real or apparent consensus. Executive pressures exist atop the corporate hierarchy, and there is a need to conform to the implicit demands of peers in high places. Solace from consensus is relevant and valuable there. The drive to conform can easily override the drive to do the right thing for the stockholders. But although a single owner can easily change a company policy, having no co-owners to convince or to fight, a corporate executive with a board of directors and potentially hostile stockholders cannot. This reason relates to, but differs from agency bias, for agency bias is refutable by demonstrating that a wrong guess was verifiably wrong. This pressure to conform is not refutable by sales data and other facts showing what is a good business decision and what is not. An example is the repeated experiences of publishers of liberal politics books that sell poorly, whereas conservative politics books sell well. It's easy for an executive to surrender to peer pressure and bask in camaraderie when surrendering to it erases the genuine pressure to do a good job. The peer pressure may unfairly represent peers' genuine attitudes if liberals create and maintain an oppressive atmosphere in boardrooms and elsewhere in management, so that conservative dissenters are kept quiet and never learn about each other. A component of this tendency is the irrational pressure to react to perceived threats by liberal groups of boycotts, vandalism, or murder. As of late 2019, that threat tends to be very low in the USA except on college campuses, but awareness of that threat can be used, probably unconsciously, to rationalize surrendering to peer pressure by mentally magnifying a trivial risk into a substantial one. Neurotransmitter addiction by the media, staff, and executives. Audiences can acquire neurotransmitter addictions, as noted above. People who work in the media are exposed, as reporters and editors and actors and scriptwriters and directors, to emotionally charged situations. This exposure can, as with the audience and its habitual exposure to emotional stimuli, induce neurotransmitter addiction in media workers and executives. In the news media, reporters and editors will favor material that gives them their own norepinephrine rush, their own oxytocin surge, and whatever else they crave. In the entertainment media, similar neuropharmacological pressures exist. Again, subliminal signals are sent throughout and in unspoken consensus forms that precludes challenging the emotional material. Consequences occur in setting media policy as subliminal signals are sent back and forth, and unspoken consensus forms that the existing corporate culture, the one that fosters the neurotransmitter addiction and its emotional feedback, should not be challenged. No one will dare to rock the boat if everyone has forgotten how to swim. Conclusion. Clients of media often prefer liberal content because of their own neurotransmitter addictions, emotional content preferences, also defective educations that disparage critical thought so quick overviews suffice, and the deep reasoning of conservative opinions is out of their reach. Media have rational reasons to prefer liberal content because of catering to a distorted customer base, intellectual property, emotional content, neurotransmitter addiction in the audience, superficial audience. Media also have rational reasons to prefer liberal content not due to having an irrational audience. Direct subservience to advertisers, fear of violence, agency bias to placate fund managers, interlocking ownership, agency bias of executives personally. Media have irrational reasons to prefer liberal content because of differential career choice fostered by media management and by job seekers, executive dissociation, misguided sense of stewardship, imposter syndrome and an urge to do something, consensus with other executives, neurotransmitter addiction among the executives. These reasons for media's liberal bias work together to suggest that a deliberate conspiracy exists. The hypothesis of a conspiracy so far remains unproven, but the observations and evidence that support a systematic liberal bias in the media are clear nevertheless. The end.